Lesson 15: Updating objects in state. 1. Updating objects in state. In React, state can hold any kind of JavaScript value, including objects. However, you should never modify those objects directly. When you need to update an object stored in state, the correct way is to create a new object, or a copy of the existing one, and then tell React to use that copy as the new state. This approach keeps your components predictable and ensures React can correctly detect changes and re-render your component. 2. What's a mutation? In JavaScript, you can store many types of values in state: numbers, strings, and booleans, for example. These primitive values are immutable, meaning they cannot be changed once created. When you update a number in state, you're not modifying the original number. You're replacing it entirely with a new value. Objects, on the other hand, can be changed in place. You can technically alter their contents directly, but doing that inside React's state system is called a mutation, and it breaks React's predictable rendering model. Even though objects in state are mutable, React expects you to treat them as if they were immutable, just like numbers or strings. So, instead of changing an existing object's property, always create a new object and replace the state with it. 3. Treat state as read-only. Whenever you store an object in state, think of it as read-only. React only re-renders components when you use the state-setter function to replace the old value with a new one. If you directly modify the existing object, React won't know that anything has changed, and your interface won't update. It's like trying to change your restaurant order after you've already eaten. The system has already moved on. So, the right way is to create a new object and pass it to the state-setter function. When you do this, you're explicitly telling React to replace the old object and render again. That's why, when done properly, your component responds immediately to user actions. 4. Deep dive. Local mutation is fine. There's an exception worth noting. If you're working with a temporary variable inside your function, something that's not stored in state, then mutating it is perfectly fine. The rule about immutability applies only to objects that are stored in React state. Once something is part of your state, you must treat it as read-only. 5. Copying objects with the spread syntax. Often, you'll want to update only part of an object in state, maybe just one field in a form, while keeping the rest of its properties unchanged. The wrong approach would be to modify the object directly. Instead, the correct way is to create a new object that copies the previous one and then overrides the property that changed. The JavaScript spread syntax is perfect for this. It lets you copy all existing fields into a new object in one step, and then you can override only what's new or changed. This keeps your state updates concise and clear. This pattern is especially helpful in forms, where you might have many fields grouped together in one object. You don't need separate state variables for every field. You can keep them all in one object, as long as you handle updates correctly. 6. Shallow copying and nested objects. It's important to understand that the spread syntax only performs a shallow copy. That means it only duplicates the object's first level of properties. If your state contains nested objects, like an object inside another object, those inner objects are not automatically copied. When you want to update a deeply nested property, you must copy each level of the object structure. First, copy the inner object you're changing, then copy the outer object that contains it, and so on, until you reach the top-level state object. It might seem a bit repetitive, but it's the safest and most reliable way to make sure React knows exactly what has changed. By replacing the whole structure step by step, you ensure that every level of your state tree is fresh and up to date. 7. Deep dive. Objects are not really nested. Even though it looks like your objects are nested, in reality, JavaScript just links one object to another. So when you copy one layer, you're only creating a new reference at that level. The other layers remain connected to the old ones unless you also copy them. That's why shallow copies alone aren't enough for deeply nested data. 8. Write concise update logic with IMA. If your state structure becomes deeply nested, writing all those spread copies can start to feel cumbersome. This is where a library called IMA can make your life easier. IMA lets you write code that looks like it's mutating an object, but under the hood, it creates all the necessary copies for you. With IMA, you can simply write what appears to be a direct update, and IMA will automatically produce a new immutable version of your state without altering the original. You can even use React's use IMA hook to simplify your update logic. This helps keep your event handlers short, readable, and free of repetitive copying code. IMA is especially useful when you have complex or deeply nested data structures. It gives you the convenience of writing mutations, while maintaining the correctness of immutable updates. 9. Deep dive. How does IMA work? IMA works by creating a special draft of your state. When you modify the draft, IMA keeps track of every change you make. Once you're done, it generates a completely new object that reflects your edits while keeping the original data untouched. This means you get immutability without all the manual copying. 10. Recap. Let's summarize the key points. First, treat all React state as immutable. Once something is in state, never modify it directly. Second, remember that mutating objects in state won't trigger re-renders, and it can even lead to inconsistent behavior because React won't know what changed. Third, instead of mutating, always create a new version of the object and use the state setter to replace the old one. Fourth, use the spread syntax to copy objects easily. It's a fast and elegant way to create new objects based on existing ones. Fifth, know that the spread operator only copies one level deep. For nested structures, you'll need to copy each layer. Finally, when your updates become complex or repetitive, consider using IMA to simplify your code. It helps you write concise, intuitive updates while keeping your state immutable and predictable.